Welcome everyone to our 2025 vibe. I'm sorry, your 2025 post-election vibe check. Here today. My name is Stacey Bryant, and I am the Democracy and Integrated Voter Engagement Coordinator for Family Values at Work. I'd like to welcome everybody near and far for taking time out of their Thursday to join us. So, as we know, this year especially, but even last year too, that the world has been heavy and dark. And today's call is really about taking a moment to pause and breathe, and that this election season was a chance to see that when people vote in favor of policies focused on thriving, families win. The government is supposed to serve the people, but instead of investing in families, workers, and our future, this year has been seen that the government gutting critical programs that millions rely on, including Medicaid, TANF, and SNAP. As we continue hurtling towards the longest shutdown in federal government history, today we are gathering to go deeper and understand what is happening in local communities around the country. For those that are new here, welcome. For those that are returning, hey again. Family Values at Work is a 501c3 organization committed to realizing a world where everyone has access to paid family and medical leave, paid sick and safe days, and affordable childcare. We pursue this world in partnership with our network of members in 27 states and counting, key partners like our panelists today, and through storytelling and education. As a nonpartisan network, Family Values at Work remains committed to fair and accessible elections and GOTV efforts. So I'd like to welcome our panelists here today. Um, because you all are awesome human beings and I've known them for quite some time in partnership with Dive, I would like to do the honors of letting them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Brian, since you're first on screen.
Hey, Stacey. Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me. My name is Brian Kennedy. I'm a senior policy analyst at Democracy North Carolina. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that's been around since 1991, and we advocate for voting access for everyone. We advocate for fair and accessible elections and things like election transparency, ensuring that every vote counts. And I've been working in policy in North Carolina for about a decade now. SNAP policy and anti-hunger policy and poverty alleviation policy. And so I really appreciate you having us here to talk about democracy, because all of those issues really come to a point when talking about democracy work. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Brian. We recognize that all of this requires functional and fair democracy. So thank you for coming. Next, we have Basilia.
Hi, everyone. I am Basilia Angel. I am the founder and president of Include Us. Include Us mission is to engineer a more inclusive world. And through that, we designed a campaign in partnership with artists and community organizations called Grita, Canta, Vota. And through Grita, Canta, Vota, we empower Latinos to vote using music. And so we really just want to encourage everyone to use their voice during every election, and to really represent, for the government to really represent who we are, what we need, and all that. So thank you for having us, Stacey.
Thank you so much for joining us. And it's nothing like having some good food and some good music to talk about voting 365 days of the year. So thank you for joining us. And last but certainly not least, Fidel, if you could tell the world who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Stacey, for the invitation to be a part of today's conversation. Hi, everyone. My name is Fidel Gomez. I use they, them, ella pronouns. So I'm the director of outreach for the Somos Loud chapter that we have here in Central Florida. Somos Loud is an affinity group of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, where we service over 3 million patients around the entire world. And with these affinity groups, we have about 10 groups that exist here in the United States and internationally as well. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to, kind of share a little bit about what information we were sharing for this election cycle, and the ongoing work that we do at Somos Loud. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Fidel. So let's get into it. So the mood here, I'm based in Detroit, Michigan. We saw some exciting results here in Detroit. We have our first Black woman mayor of the city of Detroit. So for me, the vibe in my own city was very high and very hopeful. But I know that might not be everybody's experience. What's the mood coming out of this election in your states or in your community, especially with the constant attacks on voting rights for BIPOC folks and queer folks? And anybody can jump in, unless you want me to pick you.
Well, I would definitely say, as a Floridian, I'm sure you all, very much are familiar with some of the, ongoing battles that we're fighting here in Florida. It can be a little bit exhausting, right? So this year, or for this past election, it was actually just on like local municipality levels. So we actually had a really, really big, kind of like historic fight happening in the city of Orlando, specifically for one of the districts that had quite a bit of controversy. They had a commissioner that was put in to kind of take over someone else's role because there was a lot of controversy with the former commissioner, and that did not stop them from running in this race again. And it was definitely messy. It was definitely, they wanted to ensure that, the other opponents weren't viewed as strongly, right? But as in a lot of cases, right, like somebody's work reputation, really speaks for itself. So the people decided that they wanted to keep the person that has been the interim commissioner as, as the current, as the ongoing commissioner, which was honestly a really great victory to see because they were historically a little bit of an underdog locally. And so now they've, kind of earned the right from the people that they serve, which is a historically marginalized community right outside of the downtown Orlando area where, there's a lot of redlining, a lot of like, segregation that we still kind of see where certain businesses are on certain sides of the streets. There's still like a lot of stigma that, that person would be fighting for. And was really, really excited to see that they won fair and square. What about you all?
Thank you so much for sharing. And local elections are very important, as we see. So, Basilia?
Yeah, so I moved this summer from DC to Central Valley, California, and with Grita Canta Vota, we have events a lot in the Southwest, and so we had an El Verdes Vida concert recently in Arizona, and for this election, Arizona had the special election, and so the energy there really felt like they were they're eager to get out there. I feel like there's more people to want to get involved and use their voice. And the reason I mentioned Verdes Vida is because we normally ask, as part of our registration process when they want to attend, if they want to volunteer and be part of the movement and help register more people. And we got 700 people that signed up to volunteer, which was a shocking number for us because normally we get some, but I don't know how many will actually volunteer next year because we'll send emails and stuff. But that number was quite shocking for us to see, which really made me feel like, okay, everybody's ready to get out there, help out, and do what they can. But on the ground when I was talking to people, it's a big, like a mixed bag, right? Like they're frustrated, like what's the point? And then others that are wanting to get out there. So I think everyone is just at a different place, and I think it also could potentially change depending on the news cycle. And it was very interesting in Arizona. Here in Central Valley, yeah, very interesting. Also, like it mixed, like it just really depends on who you're talking to and what level of engagement, and in terms of civic engagement training or education and how the system works. From moving to DC to California was very like I knew it, but it's very eye-opening to me how like not everybody really understands the system and how much of DC is a bubble in essence, and like how, because working in federal government and how it connects to policy and how it connects to the elections and the rotation and the cycles that go on within the federal government, to then being connected here with in community with people that don't have that level of experience, right? So then how do these things connect with one another? How does even local elections connect to the light that's like on your corner? So I feel like there's a lot of work to do, but there's people that are wanting to help and be part of it.
Thank you for sharing. And if any of the volunteers that signed up for Include Us or Vota Canta Grita, please, please, please follow through in 2026, because that is a big election year. And last but certainly not least, Brian.
I think overall the vibes are improving. Similar to Florida, we had all municipal elections across the state, but it was a lot of races. So in North Carolina, we have 100 counties. We had races in 91 of those 100 counties. And we kind of saw, I guess, what I would call historic turnout. So higher rates of turnout than we typically see in municipals. And people were talking about the races too. I'm in Durham, that's my community, and there were a number of candidate forums and debates in the weeks leading up to the elections, and that's just not something we always see with municipals. So people were engaged. There were conversations on social media and just like in coffee shops and whatever. People were actually talking about the race. I think maybe one of the other big markers at Democracy North Carolina, we do a lot of like state level policy work. And so this year has been just filled with state level attacks on our electoral system. And so one of the big things I was curious about, and I think people across the state were watching, was what impact would the attempts at really disenfranchising voters have on the municipal elections. And so it looked like people were maybe aware of the changes that are happening and maybe motivated to participate in the system because of the changes that they're seeing. That's my hopeful read of it. But I think the thing that really answered I think the thing that kind of maybe put in my mind like what the vibe is. Last night we were talking to a group of students at North Carolina A&T University, and we were just asking them about their experiences and perceptions on civic engagement and democracy. And they were really positive. They were talking about like ways to further engage like their peers and their classmates. They were talking about how important it is to be a part of the community that you're in, even if you're a college student. And what does it mean to be actively engaged in your community? So I think that there is a sense there's certainly been a sense of apathy over the past couple of years. And I think that's been an intentional effort to make people want to disengage from the process. But at least in the conversations that I've heard from folk, it seems like people are wanting to be more engaged. These students were even talking about like their education majors, and there was a speech pathologist major, and they were talking about like they're engaged because they're afraid of what the federal administration is going to do to the field of speech pathology. And so I think like that level of engagement makes me feel really hopeful and really excited. And so while these were largely nonpartisan elections across the state, there were progressive policies that candidates ran on, and I think those progressive policies were popular with folk. And so I from that perspective, like I don't want to be overly optimistic, but like at least with the young folk that I've been talking to, the vibes are good, and so I'm feeling good about that.
That's good. We definitely need some love and light, especially as we're moving into the holiday season and preparing for 2026 elections. So even though the vibe in your areas have been high, for folks, I have some family and friends who live in Texas, voter suppression tactics looked a little different this year. Still the same playbook, but for example, a lot of Texans had problems or struggle understanding the ballot language for the constitutional amendment elections, with very little to no support or education in preparing. And they are calling out that was a type of voter suppression. So even with this being like an off-cycle election, voter turnout was very low. Do you think, which is typical on off-cycle elections, but do you think that voter suppression played a direct role in voter turnout being low, or is it just typically what it is because of the voter apathy and lack of engagement?
I think voter suppression absolutely plays a role. And it's the efforts at voter suppression have been persistent and just ongoing, and it's been organized at a federal level, and it has trickled down in the states. In North Carolina, we recently this year there was a bill passed to allow counties to eliminate Sunday voting, which is what we call sold to the polls. In 2013, federal court actually struck that down and said that's illegal. It's racially discriminating. And they said it was the closest thing to a smoking gun in modern day history. And so we've seen that legislation come back. We've seen a complete effort to disinvest financially from the electoral system. So not making sure that our electoral system can't be funded the way that it should be funded. We've seen an effort to switch partisan control. So we're the only state that I know of right now where the power to appoint members to the state board of elections was taken out of the hand of the governor, and now it's the job of the state auditor to appoint members to the board of elections. So the efforts at disenfranchisement are pervasive and ongoing, and yet we saw almost 20% turnout, which is low, but compared to the past 10 years of municipal elections, it's about 3 or 4 points higher than our highest turnout rate. So it's low. It's still low. General election, we see around 70%, 75% turnout. But what we are saying is that people are watching. They know that their votes are valuable and that folk don't want them to vote. And we see that people are voting in spite of that. So that does give me hope. But I also know that the folk who don't want us to vote are not done with their tactics and their antics. So that's something we'll have to keep an eye on.
Yep. They've been doing it since before we were twinkles in our parents' eyes. So Basilia or Fidel?
I definitely agree with almost everything Brian just said, especially when it comes to the strategies that they're taking, right? The long term, the long game that they're willing to kind of like play. But also, like, I do very much relate to that sentiment of, the youth are like, I'm excited to see when I get old, because these kids now, the college age, the high schoolers, like, they are so much more aware, right? I think I'm in like my early 30s, right? So I think like when I was their age, I just was very much like, okay, whatever, My waking up to policy wasn't until much later, right? And they're here, they're ready for it. They are totally like, accountability is definitely going to be the biggest thing that they're going to be relying on like making sure that, especially these folks that are trying to harm our communities, that they're being held accountable to like the highest point that they can be. And yeah, so I definitely am looking forward to getting old just for that.
I agree.
So I agree as well. I'm really excited about the youth. And as we go, most of our events have quite a bit of a young crowd, college student aged. And this year we're actually going to be doing a college tour. But one of the things that, so I'm very excited about that, but it's because they really want the government to represent who they are and all of their values, and the way, and you could just see it like TikTok right now, right? So if you see like anybody who's running, and the videos that really connect are where like somebody that's running, it has been really authentic, sharing their stories, and stories that resemble their upbringing, right? And the majority of us are not billionaires. So a lot of those types of stories are the ones that are connecting and clicking. And You know, with TikTok, you can see the numbers on the likes and all that stuff. And so some of that stuff, I feel like we should be paying attention to, and everybody should be paying attention to, and how it, that's what has been, like, I feel like resonated with me. The more authentic storytelling is really connecting, and would love to see more of that as we move forward.
Absolutely. And I think that we are seeing more of that, because, like, for example, the momentum in the organizing that happened in New York with electing Mamdani, and specifically campaigning on the fact of affordability, including freezing rents and universal child care. So talking about the youth. And then we saw it in New Jersey with Mickey Sherrill as the incoming governor of New Jersey, ran on child care affordability, which costs an arm and a leg as a parent who has a small baby in daycare. And then we saw in Maine, voters in the state overwhelmingly rejected a ballot measure that would have rolled back voting rights. So again, those tactics about voter suppression, and approved one that will make Maine safer from gun violence, which Family Values at Work Network member Maine's Women Lobby worked closely on. So we're seeing that momentum picked up. What do you think is going to be the vibe for the 2026 midterm elections?
So I'll go first. I think we're going, I really think that 2025 for it to be not even a midterm election, right, was very loud. And so for 2026, I expect everyone to get louder, and really just, participating, because if those volunteer numbers say anything, and it seems like the group here is seeing more people ready to get involved, I just expect the energy to just get louder, and more resilient, ready.
I can completely agree to that. As I kind of was mentioning and making a joke about Florida, next year we have some really intense races that are happening. We're going to be having a governor's race, where we already have a few people that have stepped up and said that they're going to run for that seat. Our governor is at his term limit, so I'm really, really intrigued to see, how that continues to happen. I know in this year's legislative session, they try to eliminate the ways that we're able to get ballots, or like get ballot measures approved, right? And kind of relying on the fact that people get a lot of money, and trying to remove the possibility of grassroots groups organizing to get something on the ballot. But I think that people are still gonna, show up and come through. Exactly to what Basilia was saying, that like people are waking up right now. I've been to, I don't know how many 50-51 like rallies that are happening around the country, right? I've been to so many here in Orlando that have, the one that we had in last month, I want to say it had like almost like 10,000 people at it. So like people are frustrated, they want change, they are going to show up. And even for the folks, I work with a lot of LGBT and immigrant folks, even for folks that aren't able to vote. I think one of the biggest things that we need to focus on next year too is like educating them to be able to educate their friends and their family members that are able to vote, to show up for them on their behalf. So yeah, so I think that next year is I'm really excited to see how it pans out, because there's going to be so many things that are especially here in Florida going to be happening. So.
In North Carolina, we have a big Senate race coming up next year, and I think one of the things that's kind of top of mind for me, going back to, not to like run down the list of terrible things that have happened in terms of attacking our electoral system, but like early in this year, there was legislation that made it harder to track campaign finance funds, and so I think one thing I'm thinking about is campaign finance and money. I know, with municipal elections, there's always a smaller amount of money spent. And so I think what that means is that there's a little bit more of a level playing field just in terms of conversation and exposure. When it comes to 2026, we know there's going to be a ton of outside money coming into the state that's really going to shift the balance of how much grassroots organizing and grassroots money is able to speak towards different issues. So I think, I'll definitely be keeping a lookout at those major races and kind of how outside the state money influences that. And I think the other thing will be, in the general election, we had a really close Supreme Court race. And the loser did not go silently. And it really resulted in, it ended up resulting in an effort to challenge and remove the votes of nearly 65,000 voters. And it was really based on, there wasn't any merit behind it. So I think like those tactics were definitely tested before, and I anticipate that we'll see more. And so I think the advocates and folk will have to do a really good job of making sure that we're communicating out with people. How do you fix your registration issues? How do you make sure that you have what you need when you go to the polls? How do you follow up to make sure that your vote was actually counted? So I think we'll be in the nitty gritty and making sure that people not just like get to the polls, but also ensure that their votes are counted as well.
Absolutely. Thank you all for sharing what's happening in your states and what to look forward to. But I'm going to pivot a little bit to a more personal question. And I think, Basilia, you had mentioned it earlier, like it's different when you work in this space or you've been an activist or engaged for quite some time versus someone that's new. Personally, what keeps you grounded? What keeps you showing up? Because it's hard. It's very hard. Emotionally, physically, mentally, financially, all the leads. It's very hard. So what keeps you all grounded in this work?
It is absolutely hard. And I feel like, I always feel like my daughter's a blessing because it doesn't matter what's going on in the world, she's still hungry like for dinner time. And so we're going to eat and we're going to go play on the park because she's very persistent in what she wants. And so honestly, that having her allows me to really get back to life, right? Because it's very easy to get sucked into the work and there's always more to do. And then on a person like that, she helps me like just disconnect a little bit, which makes it easier then to, I actually have started practicing Kundalini, which is a bit of yoga and meditation. And so it's been helping me a lot this year. And I really needed to take that time just for silence in my head. And it really refreshes me.
Shout out to yoga. Child's pose is the bee's knees. If you do anything else, just be in child pose. So yes. What about you, Fidel?
Ooh, I would say a lot keeps me grounded. I think for myself, I two different things, I guess. So one of them is just like remembering who I am, where I'm from, what brought me here, how did I even get involved in this work, and trying to be somebody that like when new people are coming into the scene, that I'm like uplifting them, that I'm welcoming them, because a lot of times we come in with all of this energy, but no one to really like help guide you on where to go, right? And so if I can be of any support for folks, that are maybe LGBTQ plus, or that they're a child of immigrants, or they're an immigrant themselves, and like really being able to harness like what that power of your voice can look like. I think for me, that's one of the big things that keeps me grounded in it, of like, this is why I'm doing it, right? It's so easy to just get work, 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 and not even be able to like reflect on like who did I bring along with me? What were my wins that I had like a mile back there that I didn't even like stop and appreciate, you know? And I think one of the things and especially like when I first met you, Stacy, was just like just having that moment of like, okay, oh, all right, you know, it didn't go the way I wanted right now, but hey, we're gonna continue going, right? Like we're gonna take a break. We're gonna be shameless about taking the break and then get back into it when we're ready. I personally always need that nice little reminder from folks. So I know when I first met you at, I think it was the Camp Repower conference, you saw I had a moment like that, and I didn't even know you, and you helped me out through that. So I'll always appreciate that and take that with me everywhere.
Oh, thank you. And we cried a lot during that conference, but that's very important for you to just decompress and find your people to be able to lean on. Because it's
Mhm.
been rough. It's been rough. What about you, Brian?
I mean, definitely kids keep me busy and grounded, but I think community, I think history, like my grandma keeps me grounded. Um, Similar to what Fidel said, like remembering who I am and where I came from and how I got here. I'm Afro-Carolinian through and through, and so my folk have been in this place for quite some time and have been struggling for that entire time. And they've been joyful that entire time throughout the struggle. So I think, remembering that like you can struggle and fight and be joyful at the same time. Like it's actually joy is a requirement to continue to do this. That has kept me grounded. But then also like practically speaking, being outside, getting outside as much as possible. Because North Carolina, we got trees right now in North Carolina are mwah. And then art and remembering that like it's not we need all of our facets in order to fight fascism. And so like I would even Zora Neale Hurston, a Floridian, had a she has a quote in Moses Man on the Mountain where she talks about freedom, and she says like freedom you have to gather it fresh every day. And so like I think engaging in art that reminds me of what does it mean to actively to live and resist and to be whole at the same time. So trying not to watch too much news, trying to read a little bit, get outside and go on some walks.
Absolutely, absolutely. Decompress from the internet, y'all. We got to get back to our roots. Our ancestors didn't have internet, and then there's still a lot of people who don't have access to internet. So taking the time to really decompress and find what makes your heart happy, even those small moments of joy, are really important. That leads me to another question. And I know, Fidel, you have nieces and nephews, but for which I still want your insight on this as well. But Brian and Basilia, having young children who are exposed to a lot more than we probably were at their age, how do you have conversations about the hard stuff in regards to policies and lack thereof that they see affect their peers or even affect them?
I don't know. I mean, I think I'm figuring that out. My son, who's 8, we had a conversation. We've been having conversations around the federal budget, which is like a weird thing to have a conversation with an 8-year-old around. But like he came home one day and was talking about. He said big beautiful bill, and I was like, okay, like where did you hear that, and like what does that mean? And so having conversations around like I think trying to break it down and having conversations like what is the role of government and like why do we have a budget, and I think really couching it in the conversations of like we have community and there are people in our community who need different levels of support, and so we try to make sure that we support everybody in our communities. And I think I've tried to kind of couch conversations in a way that can allow him to imagine. I think it's really challenging because at least for me, I'll speak from my perspective. Like I want to, there's so many bad things going on. I want to both shield him from the bad things and also indoctrinate him so that he doesn't get confused about what's good and what's bad at the same time. And so I think, slowing down and having conversations and listening to him and hearing how he's reflecting on the stuff has been a learning process. I don't know if I answered the question or not, but it's something that I've definitely struggled with. But I think I've been a little bit more brave in trying to have conversations and trust that, he'll get it on his own terms. But Basilia, I'm curious.
Me tearing up because I think that's a testament of who you are and who your wife is as well. I don't think it's weird that you're having conversations with your 8-year-old about it, because we can only shield our kids from so much. Speaking as someone who has adult children and then have younger children, I get it. I'm still figuring it out too. But yeah, that's beautiful. Basilia?
That's a tough question, because I think we're, as parents, like, I feel like we're always figuring it out, right? One of the things that's really cute about Dalia, my daughter's Dalia, and she, the song, she was, I'm currently married, but I was single like for the majority of her life. So she's 6 now, and so it's just me and her. And when we were launching Grita Canta Bota, we actually have a song that's on YouTube and Spotify called Grita Canta Bota, and she sings that song. And she's gone to some of the events, and so she wants to get on stage, and then she's participated, and so she's like, when she sees the team, like recruiting people to sign up to vote, she also wants to do it, and when people ignore us or whatever, she's like, well, they're rude. it's just it's it's just adorable, right? Like, and so she is growing up with a different type, education on like what is voting, how to get people involved and stuff like that. But then I but she has questions about certain things. We walked past a homeless man, and she wanted to take him home. She was like, well, he doesn't have a home. Like, and so then it was like, how do you explain the system and the situations, and like, what can you do to help, and how, and so that was quite complicated. So that's when I noticed she has a big heart and really wants to help, and probably will continue in this work probably forever. And so I just, who knows what she'll decide, but it is hard to explain that. And she is she's Black and Mexican, right? And so she also doesn't look like a lot of her peers in her school currently. And so explaining to her certain things is just, even for me being Mexican, right? Like, how do I explain how ugly the world can be, but yet beautiful, when we connect with community and really live our authentic lives, and follow our hearts, and live in purpose. So, but yeah, it's a hard thing to do, Stacey.
Very hard. And Fidel, I know you have nieces and nephews, and sometimes it's easier to talk to your T's and your T's versus your own parents, because sometimes they just provide that safe space. How do you talk to your nieces and nephews?
I feel like I would be really curious to see if I'm either like the crazy like conspiracy one, or like the I'm gonna tell you how it is kind of one, like when they're older, just to hear like what they took away from what I said. I think very similarly to what Vasilia mentioned, both like I have a nephew and a niece that are both biracial, and so they're Latino. One is Latino in Black, and then the other one is Latino in white, right? And so their experiences from their lens, I've had to kind of be the one that's like kind of explaining like maybe the nuances that they're not picking up on just yet, right? Or um for example, my nephew, right? He plays football, right? And there's a lot of things that his teammates do or like say, and I'm like, babe, you can't say that. Like that is not okay. Like, you guys shouldn't be joking around like that. But also at the same time, let me explain why, right? I think it's so easy to just be like, yes, no, right? And just kind of be like the authoritative you know, I call myself an uncle because as I'm a trans person, I feel like I'm an aunt and uncle to them. And so I try to instill like guidance and some positivity and provide a safe space for them, but also like keep it really real because I do live so far away from my family that I don't see them frequently. So like I want to make sure that they're still getting bits and pieces of maybe of what they're not getting at home with my siblings. When it comes to certain nuances that like race and understanding socioeconomic, differences between folks and having compassion, for folks that maybe they don't have the same things that you do. Um, but I think one of my biggest joys is just being able to be like, okay, here you go. Back to your mom. Because, I love them very much, but, sometimes it can be a lot to try to have conversations that maybe they're not ready to have, or, they like to kind of like what I was mentioning earlier. Like, I feel like some of the youth, like some of the things that we create in our minds of like, oh, they're gonna do this and then like they do the complete opposite sometimes. Like they shock me all the time of like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like, okay, you're trans. Okay. When like the older folks in my family are like, oh, you're trans, there's a big difference on what they accept and what's normalized to them. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing. And I'm glad that you all thought that was a tough question. I tried to put on my journalist hat. So my last and final question, what advice do you have to anyone that's listening or may listen later who wants to plug in but really doesn't know where to begin?
I can start with you.
Okay.
I'll just say real quick. I think if you're in North Carolina, the election is over, but we're not finished with the electoral process yet. There's a canvass period that happens after the election, and so that's the process where the county boards review, absentee ballots and provisional ballots, and they actually go through and make sure that the votes count. And that's a public process. So I think one really, really good way to get involved is to, show up to your county canvass meetings, and be there and sit in person and watch those people and make sure that they're doing what they need to be doing. North Carolina also passed a policy that allows anybody to challenge a ballot. They don't actually, and so those are different ways. It's small ways, very small and minor ways, but ways to disenfranchise folk. And so I think if you voted for the first time, then go deeper and engage with your county board of elections. And I'll stop there. I think taking a look at your electoral administration, that's kind of boring stuff, but the devil's in the details. And if we want to prepare for 2026 and in 2028 and making sure that everybody's vote counts, we're going to have to do a better job making sure that we're keeping an eye on how our elections are administered. And I still have to say also, we need to support our electoral workers too, and make sure that they are paid adequately, making sure that they are protected. And so, yeah, those are the things that I would start off and say.
Thank you, Brian.
I agree. I think start local, right? And so I feel like that's an opportunity, actually being part of the electoral process, getting that job, right? So I know there's a lot of people looking for jobs. So next year, that's an opportunity for people to sign up and be there, witnessing, supporting. We need a lot of bilingual workers to help support in Spanish, assist, with filling out the ballots and things like that. So that's an opportunity locally, following a local organization. With Grita Canta Vota, you could follow us, but a lot of our messaging is national because we have national reach. So it makes it really hard to talk about every detail in every state. So it's very important to be connected with a local organization that does talk about the issues within the state at a deeper level than we could, right? And signing up to volunteer with those organizations, as well as ours, which you can sign up to volunteer at Grita Canta Vota. But it's to me, it really starts local, and it could be something as simple as showing up to City Hall, see what they're saying, see what they're doing, what are they voting on. You'd be surprised what they're saying and talking about. So make your voice heard.
Absolutely. And I think we lost Fidel. If they come back, then I will certainly have them answer that question. But we know that the powerful reality is that our work is a work of hope. We wake up each day and believe in the idea that our world can be different, especially for the younger generation and our children, and at some point, maybe our grandchildren. That we can have affordable childcare and paid family and medical leave and paid safe sick days and the fair democracy for us to be able to survive. Well, for us to be able to thrive, not just survive. And when the world asks us to give up and silence ourselves, weeks like this, conversations like this tell a different story. And I think that's what I'm taking away from this conversation. When we organize and show up, we have a chance to vote for the world we want to see and a chance to be heard. Like you said, be loud 2026. Continue to be loud. Let's not put a year to it. Be loud 365 days of the year, every year, because we matter. We absolutely matter. So I'd like to thank our amazing panelists and good friends of mine, Basila, Fidel, and Brian, and as well as our ASL interpreters, Finn and Jessica. I thank you all for joining us and know that we together in solidarity can make change. We can make an impact. And we hope that you continue to bring momentum. And you can also join us by following us on social media. And we'll be having some additional training soon through Family Values at Work for upcoming season harvest trainings. So I thank you all for attending and taking time out of your Thursday. And I hope that you all have a safe and wonderful day.